You're about to discover something that will change everything you thought you knew about how life really works. And I need you to listen closely, because what I'm about to share with you isn't just theory or philosophy. This is the living truth that I've watched transform thousands of lives, including my own. Right now, in this very moment, you are standing at a doorway. On one side is everything you've known, all the struggle and limitation you've accepted as normal. On the other side is a life so magnificent, so filled with answered prayers and seeming miracles that your current self can barely imagine it. And the only thing between you and that life is understanding one simple, powerful truth that most people never learn. I'm going to tell you something that might sound almost too simple to be true, but I promise you, it is the master key to everything you've been seeking. Your words are not just sounds that disappear into the air. Your thoughts are not just fleeting notions that mean nothing. They are the most powerful creative force in your existence. Every single word you speak, every thought you hold in your mind, is a blueprint that the universe is following with perfect precision. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are not at the mercy of fate or luck or other people's decisions. You are the architect of your entire reality, and you have been all along. Now, I know what you might be thinking. If that were true, why isn't your life already perfect? Why do you still struggle? Why do things go wrong? And this is where most people get lost, because they don't understand the invisible laws that govern this creative process. They don't realize that their subconscious beliefs, their habitual thought patterns, and especially their words, are constantly creating their reality, whether they're aware of it or not. You've been creating all along, but you've been creating unconsciously, by default, according to old patterns and fears and limitations that were programmed into you before you even knew what was happening. But today, that changes. Today, you're going to learn how to become a conscious, deliberate creator of your life. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it, using principles that have been tested and proven by thousands of people who've gone from lack to abundance, from sickness to health, from loneliness to love, from despair to joy. These aren't just nice ideas. This is spiritual law, as reliable and predictable as the law of gravity. Let me start by telling you about the game of life and how it really works, because once you understand this, everything else will fall into place. Life is not a battle. It's not something you have to fight your way through with gritted teeth and endless struggle. Life is a game, and like any game, it has rules. But here's what's beautiful, and what changes everything when you truly grasp it. The rules are in your favor. The universe itself is designed to say yes to you. It wants you to win. It wants to give you everything your heart desires. But you have to learn how to play by the actual rules, not the ones you were taught by people who didn't know any better. The first rule is this: your subconscious mind is completely impersonal. It doesn't judge whether your thoughts are good for you or bad for you. It simply accepts whatever you impress upon it as truth, and then sets about making it real in your external world. If you constantly think and speak about lack, your subconscious says, yes, lack is what we're creating, and it brings you experiences of lack. If you constantly worry about illness, your subconscious says, yes, illness is what we're manifesting, and it begins to create conditions in your body that match that expectation. It doesn't do this to punish you, it's simply following orders. It's the most faithful servant you could ever have, but it will serve you destructive patterns just as faithfully as constructive ones. This is why most people are living in what I call the prison of their own making. They're not being held back by the world, by other people, or even by their past. They're being held back by their own mental patterns and the words they speak day after day. And the tragedy is, they don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're just describing reality when they say, I can't afford that, or I'm not lucky in love, or I never get a break. But they're not describing reality, they're creating it. Every single time they speak those words, they're sending out a command to the universe, and the universe has no choice but to obey. Now, I want you to think about your own life for a moment. What stories have you been telling about yourself? What words do you repeat so often that they've become your identity? Listen to yourself over the next few hours and notice the language you use. Do you say things like, I'm so broke, I'm terrible with money, I always get sick this time of year, nobody understands me, I'm not good enough? Every one of those statements is a decree. It's a command you're giving to the creative power within you. And that power is obligated by spiritual law to manifest the conditions that match your words. But here's where it gets exciting. If negative words create negative conditions, then positive words, spoken with conviction and faith, must create positive conditions. And that's not just hopeful thinking. That's spiritual law. That's the way the universe actually works. And I've seen it demonstrated so many times, in such remarkable ways, that I know beyond any shadow of doubt that it's true. Let me tell you about a woman who came to me years ago. She was in what seemed like an impossible situation. Her business had failed, she was deeply in debt, her health was suffering, and she felt completely hopeless. She said to me, "Florence, I've tried everything, nothing works for me. I'm just unlucky." And I said to her, "That's your problem, right there. Every time you say you're unlucky, you're creating more of that experience. You're decreeing lack and limitation over your life." She looked at me like I was crazy. "But it's true," she said. "Look at my life. How can I say I'm lucky when everything is falling apart?" And this is the key point that most people miss. You don't wait for conditions to change before you change your words. You change your words first, and then the conditions must follow. That's the law. You cannot keep speaking the old story and expect a new reality. You have to begin to speak the truth you want to see, even when your current circumstances seem to contradict it. So I taught this woman to begin making new statements. Instead of "I'm so broke," she learned to say, "Money flows to me easily and abundantly from expected and unexpected sources." Instead of "Nothing works for me," she began to declare, "Every situation works together for my highest good." Instead of "I'm unlucky," she started affirming, "I am divinely guided and incredibly fortunate." At first, she felt ridiculous. She said it felt like lying, but I explained to her that she'd been lying all along when she claimed to be unlucky and limited, because the truth of her spiritual nature is unlimited abundance and perfect divine support. It took about 3 weeks before she started to really feel the shift internally. She kept up her new declarations, and slowly, her whole mental atmosphere began to change. She started to notice opportunities she would have missed before. A friend mentioned a job opening. A debt she thought was lost was suddenly repaid. Her health began to improve. Within 3 months, her entire life had transformed. Not because she worked harder or got lucky or had anyone rescue her. It transformed because she changed her word, and her word changed her world. This is not an isolated story. I have hundreds of examples like this. People who learned to speak life instead of death, abundance instead of dearth, lack, love instead of fear, and watch their entire reality reshape itself to match their new inner conviction. And you can do this too. Not someday when you're more spiritual or more worthy or more ready. Right now. Today. In this very moment, you can begin to shift the trajectory of your entire life simply by becoming aware of your words and consciously choosing new ones that align with what you truly desire. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. You don't need to finish a course or read 10 more books. The power is already within you, waiting to be activated through your spoken word. Think of it this way. Every word you speak is like planting a seed in the fertile soil of the invisible realm. And here's what most people don't realize. The universe doesn't judge whether your seeds are good or bad. It simply grows whatever you plant. If you plant seeds of lack by saying, "I can't afford that," the universe says, "Your wish is my command," and produces more situations where you can't afford things. If you plant seeds of health by affirming, "My body knows how to heal itself," the universe responds with vitality and restoration. I've watched this principle work in the most remarkable ways. A woman once came to me drowning in debt, constantly saying things like, "I'm so broke and money just slips through my fingers." I had her begin using a simple affirmation, "Money flows to me easily and constantly." She felt ridiculous saying it at first. Her logical mind screamed that it wasn't true. But she persisted. Within 3 months, she received an unexpected inheritance, a promotion at work, and found money she'd forgotten about in an old account. The external circumstances shifted to match her new inner speech. This isn't magic, it's spiritual law, as reliable as gravity. Your words are creating your tomorrow, right now. The conversation you had this morning about how tired you are, that's programming fatigue into your future. The joke you made about always being unlucky, that's ordering up more misfortune. The casual comment that you'll never find the right person? That's blocking love from reaching you. But here's the beautiful part. Once you understand this, once you truly grasp that your words are creative tools, you can begin to use them deliberately. You become the architect of your experience instead of its victim. Start small if you need to. Pick one area of your life that feels stuck. Notice what you habitually say about it. Then craft a new statement, a powerful declaration that represents what you want instead. Say it daily. Say it when the old pattern tries to resurface. Say it especially when circumstances seem to contradict it, because that's when your word has the most power to shift reality. And here's what most people miss. They think speaking their word once or twice should do the trick. They make their declaration, wait a day, see nothing change, and give up. But reprogramming your subconscious isn't like flipping a light switch. It's like training a muscle that's been conditioned to move in the opposite direction for years. Your subconscious mind doesn't argue with you. It doesn't debate the truth of what you're saying. It simply accepts through repetition and feeling. When you've thought, "I'm not enough," 10,000 times, you can't expect one affirmation to override that. You need consistent, persistent repetition, coupled with emotional conviction. This is why I always say, saturate your consciousness with the truth. Let your new statement become the background music of your mind. Write it down. Speak it aloud. Whisper it to yourself throughout the day. Let it be the first thought when you wake and the last before sleep. And watch what happens. At first, your mind will resist. You'll feel foolish. The words will seem hollow, like lies you're telling yourself. That's the old pattern fighting for survival. Don't stop. Keep speaking your word, because with each repetition, you're weakening the old neural pathway and strengthening the new one. I've seen people transform their entire financial situation by consistently declaring, "Money comes to me easily and constantly." Not hoping it would. Not wishing it might. Declaring it as established fact. Within weeks, unexpected checks arrive, job opportunities appear, debts are mysteriously forgiven. Why? Because their consciousness shifted, and when consciousness shifts, circumstances must follow. The universe is a faithful mirror. It reflects back whatever you're holding in dominant thought and feeling. When you speak your word with unwavering conviction, you're not trying to convince the universe of anything. You're convincing yourself. You're reminding your own subconscious mind of the truth that already exists in the spiritual realm, waiting to take form in your physical experience. This is the secret the masters have always known. Your word is your wand. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your inner speech. Change your word, and you change your world. I remember a student who came to me, drowning in bills she couldn't pay. Every morning, she woke up saying, "I can't afford this, I don't have enough, I'm so broke." And every day, her circumstances reflected those exact words back to her. I said to her, "You're treating poverty like a beloved friend. You're inviting it to breakfast, lunch, and dinner." So we changed her inner conversation. Instead of, "I can't afford this," she began to say, "Infinite abundance is mine now." Instead of, "I'm so broke," she declared, "I am surrounded by the riches of the universe." Within weeks, not months, not years, but weeks, unexpected money began to flow into her life. An old debt was repaid. A freelance opportunity appeared. A relative gifted her exactly what she needed. This wasn't magic, this was law. She changed her inner speech, and the universe had no choice but to rearrange itself to match her new vibration. You see, most people think they need to see the money first, then they'll feel abundant. But that's backwards. You must feel abundant first, speak abundantly first, and then the money appears. The outer world is always a delayed photograph of your inner world. Your inner conversations are either building bridges to your desires or walls against them. There is no neutral ground. Every thought, every whispered word to yourself is either a yes or a no to what you want. I once knew a woman who wanted to marry, but every time she thought about marriage, she said to herself, "All the good men are taken. I'm too old. Nobody wants me." She was literally arguing for her own loneliness. When I pointed this out, she was shocked. She didn't realize she was sentencing herself to solitude with her own words. We transformed her inner speech. She began to say, "My perfect partner is seeking me now. I am loved, cherished, and adored." She stopped reciting reasons why love was impossible and started affirming why it was inevitable. Within 6 months, she met a wonderful man who treated her like royalty. He had been there all along, but she couldn't see him through the fog of her negative inner speech. Your inner conversations are creating your outer circumstances right now, this very moment. While you're sitting there worrying about money, someone else with less talent and fewer resources is affirming abundance and watching opportunities flow to them like iron to a magnet. While you're rehearsing that difficult conversation and imagining all the ways it could go wrong, you're actually sending that person a subconscious blueprint of conflict. Your words reach them before your mouth ever opens. I've watched this principle work with such mathematical precision that it would astound you. A man came to me drowning in debt, absolutely convinced he would never get ahead. Every morning he would wake up and his first thought would be about what he owed. All day long, a running commentary: I can't afford this, I'll never have enough. Money slips through my fingers, and naturally, that's exactly what happened. He would get a little extra money and immediately some unexpected expense would devour it. His car would break down. His landlord would raise the rent. It was like the universe was taking orders from his mental restaurant and serving him exactly what he kept ordering. I gave him one assignment: change the inner conversation. Instead of waking up and immediately inventorying his lack, he was to say, money flows to me easily and constantly. I am a money magnet. Abundance is my natural state. He resisted at first. But that's not true, he protested. And I said, neither was your story about permanent poverty, but you believed that fiction readily enough. He started the practice reluctantly, feeling foolish. But within 3 weeks, something shifted. A former colleague called with a freelance opportunity. He found $100 bill in an old jacket. His skills suddenly seemed more valuable, and he negotiated a raise he'd been too afraid to ask for. Within 6 months, his debt was cut in half, and he had savings for the first time in years. Money didn't just show up. His consciousness around money had transformed. He stopped seeing himself as someone who struggled and started seeing himself as someone money flowed to naturally. That's the difference between affirmations that work and ones that just bounce off the surface of your life. But here's where most people stumble. They treat affirmations like a desperate plea to the universe. They say the words with clenched fists and worried faces, checking their bank account every 5 minutes to see if anything's changed yet. That energy cancels out everything you're trying to create. I worked with a woman who wanted to heal a relationship with her sister. They hadn't spoken in 3 years after a terrible argument. She came to me saying all the right things about forgiveness and reconciliation. But every time she spoke about her sister, her jaw tightened and her eyes went cold. Her words said forgiveness. Her entire being screamed resentment. I told her what I'm telling you now. You cannot fool the universal law. It doesn't hear your words. It reads your vibration. It responds to what you actually believe, not what you wish you believed. So we worked differently. Instead of affirming that her sister would call or that they'd reconcile, she started with something she could actually feel into. I am willing to see this differently. That's all. Just willingness. Not force, not pretending everything was fine. Just cracking open the door to a new possibility. She said it every morning. Some days it felt true. Other days it felt like a lie. But she kept going. And gradually, something shifted. She noticed she wasn't rehearsing old arguments in her head anymore. She stopped telling the story of what her sister had done to anyone who would listen. The charge around it began to dissolve. Then one afternoon, completely out of the blue, her sister sent a text. Nothing dramatic. Just a photo of something that reminded her of a joke they used to share. My client didn't even overthink it. She responded naturally, warmly. Within a week, they were talking on the phone. Within a month, they met for coffee. Within 3 months, they were dating. And here's what matters. None of it felt forced. None of it felt desperate. There was no energy of, please validate me, or I need you to complete me. She had already validated herself. She was already complete. The relationship became a beautiful addition to an already fulfilling life, not a rescue mission from an empty one. This is how the law works when you stop manipulating it. You become magnetic, not through techniques, but through transformation. Now, I want to address something that might be stirring in your mind right now. A question that surfaces whenever we talk about letting go. About releasing control. About trusting the universe to deliver. You might be thinking, but doesn't that mean I do nothing? Doesn't that make me passive? Isn't that just spiritual bypassing dressed up in pretty language? And I understand the confusion, because we've been taught that surrender equals weakness, that letting go means giving up, that faith is just another word for laziness. But let me be abundantly clear, what I'm describing is not passivity. It's not sitting on your couch eating bonbons while waiting for the universe to deliver your desires on a silver platter. True surrender, true letting go, is one of the most active, engaged, powerful states you can inhabit. When you let go of obsessive control, you free up massive amounts of energy that was previously tied up in anxiety, manipulation, and forcing. That energy becomes available for inspired action. And inspired action is completely different from desperate action. Desperate action comes from fear. It asks, what can I do to make this happen? What can I control? What technique can I use to force this outcome? Inspired action comes from alignment. It asks, what feels right? What lights me up? What step is appearing naturally in front of me? The woman who met her partner wasn't passive. She was actively engaged in her life, actively pursuing her interests, actively showing up as her best self. But her actions weren't designed to manipulate an outcome. They were expressions of who she was becoming. Do you see the difference? One is exhausting, the other is energizing. One contracts you, the other expands you. One makes you smaller, the other makes you more fully yourself. When you release the death grip on how things must unfold, you don't become less powerful. You become more available to the power that's already flowing through you. You stop blocking the river with your hands and start moving with its current. And the current always knows where it's going. This is why spiritual understanding is practical power. It's not about floating away into some abstract realm where nothing matters. It's about recognizing the precise mechanics of how reality responds to consciousness. When you know the law, you can work with it deliberately, instead of being tossed around by whatever happens to be playing in your mental theater. I've watched people transform their entire experience of life, not by changing their circumstances first, but by changing their inner conversation. A woman came to me once, absolutely convinced she was destined for poverty. Every word out of her mouth confirmed it. I never have enough. Money slips through my fingers. I'm just not lucky with finances. And her life? Exactly as she described. But here's what shifted everything. She started speaking a different story. Not as wishful thinking, but as recognition of truth. God is my unfailing supply. Every right action is richly rewarded. She didn't wait to feel it. She spoke it. She declared it. And slowly, then suddenly, her experience began to mirror her new inner narrative. The old pattern had to die. And that's the part people don't always prepare for. When you start claiming something new, the old structure resists. It throws up every bit of evidence to prove you wrong. This is the testing time. This is when you discover whether you truly believe what you're speaking or whether you're just trying on pretty words. The universe doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you actually believe underneath the words. So when you speak truth and then immediately contradict it with worry or doubt, you're sending mixed signals. You're praying and then unpraying. This is why I always say, never look back. Don't speak your word and then turn around to see if it's working. Don't plant a seed and then dig it up every day to check if it's sprouting. That act of checking is actually an act of doubt. It tells the universe, I don't really believe this will work, so I better keep monitoring it. I once knew a woman who affirmed prosperity every morning with beautiful words. But then she'd spend her entire day checking her bank account, counting her money, calculating how many days until she'd run out. She'd speak abundance, and then immediately inventory her lack. She was like a farmer who plants corn but keeps measuring the empty field, announcing how much corn she doesn't have yet. Your subconscious doesn't hear the morning affirmation if the rest of your day is a denial. It hears the dominant vibration. It responds to where you're actually living, not where you're occasionally visiting in your thoughts. The real work is in holding your words steady in the face of appearances. When everything around you seems to contradict what you've spoken, that's when your word is being tested. That's when the universe is asking, do you really believe this, or were you just experimenting? This is where most people give up. They speak their word, nothing immediately changes, and they say, see, I knew it wouldn't work. But that very statement is what guarantees failure. You've just canceled your own demonstration. I've watched this happen 1,000 times. Someone will do the spiritual work, speak the truth, claim they're good, and then 3 days later, when they don't see results, they take it all back. They go right back to the old conversation. Nothing ever works for me. I'm always struggling. This spiritual stuff is nonsense. And the universe says, as you wish. You must become stubborn in your truth. Not forcing, not efforting, but absolutely refusing to return to the old narrative. When someone asks how you're doing, and every appearance screams limitation, you don't lie, but you don't energize the problem either. You speak from your desired end. Thank you for asking, things are aligning beautifully. Not as affirmation gymnastics, but as the truth of the invisible dimension that is more real than what eyes report. Your friends might think you've lost touch with reality. The truth? You've gained touch with a higher reality. You've stopped being hypnotized by conditions and started being magnetized by vision. This is where most teaching stops, right at the threshold of the real work. They give you the techniques, the affirmations, the vision boards, and send you off like you're fully equipped. But what they don't tell you is that living from the end is a moment-by-moment choice that will be tested by everything you encounter. Every conversation becomes a choice point. Every text message, every email, every glance in the mirror. Will you react from what is, or respond from what is becoming? Will you speak the language of limitation, or the language of fulfillment? And here's what makes this so challenging. You're often doing this alone. The people around you are fluent in the language of conditions. They bond over problems, they connect through commiseration, they validate each other's struggles. When you refuse to speak that language anymore, you can feel isolated. But this is temporary. Because as you hold your inner vision steady, as you persist in living from your desired end, despite zero external validation, something remarkable happens. You stop needing their agreement. You stop requiring their understanding. Your inner conviction becomes so solid that external opposition feels like clouds passing across the sun. Present, yes, but incapable of diminishing the light. And then, quietly, without announcement or fanfare, the external begins to shift. Not because you've been forcing it, but because you've been faithful to the inner reality. The opportunity appears, the conversation happens, the door opens, the evidence begins to materialize. This is what I mean by living from the end. It's not a weekend workshop technique. It's a complete reorientation of consciousness that changes how you move through every moment of your life. You know what's interesting? Most people think this is complicated. They think they need years of practice or some special gift. But children do this naturally every single day. Watch a child playing. They don't pretend to be an astronaut while simultaneously worrying about whether they're really an astronaut. They are the astronaut. Completely, totally. Without reservation. Somewhere along the way, we learned to split ourselves. We learned to hedge our bets. We learned to prepare for disappointment by never fully committing to the vision. We call this being realistic, but what we've really done is train ourselves to live in contradiction. Here's what I want you to understand. Your consciousness cannot serve two masters. You cannot simultaneously live from the wish fulfilled and from the fear of its absence. You cannot be both the person who has it and the person who desperately needs it. This is why affirmations often fail. Because you're saying the words from the consciousness of lack, not from the consciousness of fulfillment. Living from the end means you stop auditioning for your own life. You stop trying to convince the universe you're worthy. You stop performing desperation. Instead, you simply accept that it is already done, and you let your actions flow from that acceptance. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become aligned. When you know your desire is already fulfilled in consciousness, you move differently. You make decisions from abundance, not scarcity. You take action from inspiration, not desperation. You speak from certainty, not pleading. Let me tell you something that will probably challenge you. The reason most people never experience this is not because the law doesn't work. it's because they refuse to fully commit to the assumption. They want proof before they believe. They want evidence before they accept. But that's backwards. The assumption must come first. The state must be occupied first. Then, and only then, does reality reorganize itself to match. This is why affirmations sometimes fail. They are spoken from the wrong state. You stand in lack and recite abundance. You dwell in fear and declare faith. But the words have no power because the house you are speaking from is the house of the opposite condition. The state must shift first. You must walk into the wish fulfilled. You must occupy the feeling of the answered prayer. And from that residence, you speak, you act, you assume. I knew a woman who desired marriage. For years she affirmed it, visualized it, prayed for it, nothing moved. Then one day she understood. She was affirming from loneliness. She was visualizing from lack. She was praying from a consciousness of being unwanted. So she changed her state. She began to live as though she were already loved, already cherished, already chosen. She walked differently. She spoke differently. She no longer sought validation. She rested in the feeling of fulfillment. Within 3 months, the man appeared. And he did not cause her happiness. He confirmed the state she had already entered. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. You do not attract what you want. You express what you are. And what you are is determined by the state you occupy. So ask yourself now, what state am I living in? What assumption am I making about myself, about life, about what is possible for me? Because that state, that assumption, is your creative power. It is the unseen hand shaping every circumstance. It is the silent architect of your entire world. And the glorious truth is this: you can change states at any moment. You are not locked in. You are not trapped by history or circumstance or condition. You can, right now, turn within and occupy a new state. You can assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. You can dwell in the consciousness of answered prayer. And when you do, the world must reflect it, not because you worked harder, not because you deserved it more, but because consciousness is the only reality and all things conform to the state from which you operate. This is your inheritance. This is your power, not to manipulate the outer world, but to shift the inner one. And in that shift, all things become new.